Langstaff for seeking justice for victims and for the inquiry's constructive additional report. His ambition was to ensure that fair compensation is provided to every person that is eligible without delay, and that resonates across the country. Before considering the detail of the report, I want to share the latest delivery figures from the Infected Blood Compensation Authority. As of the 15th of July, IBCA has contacted 2,215 people to begin their claim, with 1,934 having started the claim process. 808 offers have been made, with a total value of over 602 million. 587 people have accepted their offer, with over £411 million paid in compensation, meaning approximately 60% of infected people registered with a support scheme have been contacted to begin their claim. I'm pleased that progress is being made, but I acknowledge the calls from the community for faster payment. That is why the Government wrote to the Public Accounts and the Public Administration and Constitutional Affairs Committees last month, outlining the steps we are taking to remove administrative barriers to IBCA speeding up payments. I'm also pleased to announce, Madam Deputy Speaker, further interim payments of £210,000 to the estates of infected people who are registered to an infected blood support scheme and have sadly passed away. This is in addition to the over 500 interim payments already paid, and I will provide further information on this as soon as I am able to. Madam Deputy Speaker, the Government is committed to providing fair compensation to victims of the infected blood scandal. And in the autumn budget, we have set aside £11.8 billion to do that. The inquiry has recognised the Government's commitment, saying there can be no doubt that the Government has done right in ways which powerfully signal its intent. However, I agree with Sir Brian's statement that there is still more to be done to ensure that the detail and operation of the scheme matches up to its intent. Sir Brian has made a number of recommendations on ways the compensation scheme could be amended to achieve a scheme which works for everyone. We will publish an update on Govt.uk today, setting out the Government's approach to the inquiry's further recommendation. I will deposit a copy of that update in the House libraries. We will also provide a comprehensive response to all the recommendations in due course. The report includes several recommendations for IBCA on speed and transparency. I want to first reiterate that the Government still expects IBCA to contact all registered infected people to begin a claim and open the service for affected people by the end of this year. And the announcements I'm about to make do not change that position. Now, on Friday, Sir Robert Francis and David Foley confirmed they will be accepting the recommendations the inquiry made to IBCA, and they have committed to working with the community to develop plans for designing and implementing those recommendations. IBCA will design and introduce a process for registration. They will also update their sequencing in line with the inquiry's recommendation, noting this will inform the order in which they open up to cohorts this year. IBCA will introduce a process for prioritisation, recognising that community involvement is needed in tackling any uncertainty which this may introduce. Alongside this, I have asked for a review of IBCA's delivery of the scheme to ensure that it is progressing as quickly as possible. This will be supported by the National Infrastructure and Service Transformation Authority, NISTA, and led by an independent reviewer, and I expect the review to begin in August. Now, the inquiry has made recommendations across 9 key areas to ensure that infected and affected people feel that they have overall been compensated fairly by a scheme that is designed and delivered with their input. Separate to the delivery of compensation by IBCA, the inquiry has made recommendations relating to the design and structure of the scheme. 7 of these sub-recommendations the Government will accept and implement as soon as we can, so that IBCA can get on with paying compensation. Others will require engagement with the community before the changes are made, in line with the spirit of the inquiry's report. Now, when I gave evidence to the inquiry in May, I said I would take a constructive approach and I would look at the issues which have been put to me. The inquiry has made 8 sub-recommendations in these areas, and I'm pleased to confirm to the House that I'm either accepting these or agreeing with the inquiry that the community should be consulted on next steps. So I can confirm we will remove the 1982 start date for HIV infection. to ensure anyone infected due to infected blood or infected blood products with HIV is eligible for the scheme regardless of the infection date. We accept the inquiry's recommendation on affected estates. In fact, Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm actually going to go further than the inquiry's recommendation. The inquiry recommended that where someone who would be an eligible affected person sadly died or dies between the 21st of May 2024 and 31st of December 2029, their claim will not die with them but becomes part of the estate. I'm actually going to extend that by a further 2 years to the 31st of December 2031. The special category mechanism I know has been a concern for members of the community and this House. Again, I promised the House previously I would look at this, and I'm pleased to say we accept change is needed to acknowledge the special category mechanism as part of the supplementary route severe health condition award, and we'll be engaging with the community on how best to realise these changes. Another area I committed to consider was to reinstate support payments to partners bereaved after the 31st of March 2025 until they receive compensation. Again, I'm accepting this recommendation, and I will ensure that those impacted will also be able to continue receiving those payments as part of their compensation package. The issue of unethical research is one of the most shocking aspects of this scandal. I can also confirm to the House today we will consult on revising the approach for the additional autonomy award on unethical research, including the scope and value of the award, and I know that's something that a number of honourable members have raised to me. The final area I said I would consider was whether further supplementary routes for affected people could be introduced. The inquiry recommended we consult to understand the feasibility of how these could be implemented alongside changes regarding the Exceptional Financial Loss Award. I agree with the inquiry that consideration should be given to these issues, and consideration rightly involves those impacted. In addition, we're accepting further inquiry recommendations to remove the requirement for evidence of the date of diagnosis for hepatitis B or C, which we hope may allow claims for those mono-infected with hepatitis to be processed more quickly. And by accepting these recommendations today, we can start to implement the necessary changes as soon as possible. Now, there are several recommendations on areas where changes to the scheme are needed. We intend to engage the community on how best to achieve them. The inquiry is clear. People impacted by decisions need to be involved in them, and that is what we will seek to do before implementing these changes in the scheme. This includes acting on recommendations regarding compensation for the impacts of interferon. We will introduce a new core route infection severity band for those who received interferon treatment, and consult on the evidence requirements and threshold for a supplementary route award for severe psychological harm. Additionally, we will work with IBCA to introduce a mechanism that individuals can use to raise concerns to aid continuous improvement of the scheme. Now, I'm sure honourable members will understand that to do this, the government will need to make further regulations. Our top priority is to move quickly, and so to make some of the simpler changes, we will bring forward a set of regulations as soon as parliamentary time allows. These regulations will not implement all the policy changes recommended by the inquiry. In the evidence of the inquiry in May, I said I was open to changes that do not lead to further delays. I believe that by making these changes recommended to the inquiry, it will not delay the speed at which offers are currently being made. Now, a further set of regulations will be needed to implement the more substantial changes, particularly those, Madam Deputy Speaker, where we are taking time to engage the community on how those updates can be realised. So therefore, I would accept this second, more substantial set of regulations to be brought before Parliament in 2026. But we do not expect, and I really emphasise this to honourable members, this engagement causing delays to the rollout of the scheme as it currently stands, which is absolutely crucial, as I said, to the inquiry. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, we are responding swiftly and constructively to Sir Brian and putting the voices and needs of the community first. Now, Madam Deputy Speaker, I'd also like to provide a further update on the Government's response to the 2024 report. I have continued to engage with the charities that are named by the inquiry in Recommendation 10. I recognise their concerns about the allocated funding and can confirm that the Department for Health and Social Care is re-examining funding for this year and will look at options for the future. With regard to recommendation 2 on memorialisation, I'm pleased to announce that following engagement with the community, Clive Smith has been appointed the chair of the Memorial Committee. And I'm delighted to be able to appoint a chair with his wealth of experience, and I'm confident he will be able to bring the community together to make great progress on this work. Madam Deputy Speaker, this government has made progress on implementing the recommendations, but progress is never a foregone conclusion. Sir Brian is clear about the importance of scrutinising progress in delivering what the government has committed to, and I agree. And I'm pleased to confirm I have asked PACAC to take on the role of scrutinising implementation of the inquiry's recommendations in both the May 2024 and July 2025 reports. It's for the committee to outline how they approach this work, but I trust they will see fit to follow the example of the inquiry through scrutiny of the design and delivery of compensation. In addition, today, I am publishing a record of inquiry recommendations and the government response on Govt.uk, as promised in our response to the recommendation of the Grenfell Tower inquiry. These records will be periodically updated to show implementation progress and will include all recommendations of future inquiries. Madam Deputy Speaker, to conclude, I would like to quote directly from Sir Brian's report, where he ends by stating that truly involving people, infected and affected, in how the state recognises their losses would start to turn the page on the past. He is absolutely right. Our focus as we move forward must be working together with the community, with IBCA and indeed with each other in this House, to not only deliver justice to all those impacted, but essentially to restore trust in the state to people who have been let down too many times. I commend this statement to the House.
Shadow Minister Mike Wood.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I thank the Right Honourable Gentleman for his statement and for advance sight of it. On behalf of His Majesty's loyal opposition, I would like to thank Sir Brian Langstaff for his initial work on the inquiry and for all the follow-up work he has done. This additional report, focusing on compensation, is a significant and very thorough piece of work which has been done in good time. And our thanks also go to those working at the Infected Blood Compensation Authority to get the money out to those who desperately need it. I know that my right honourable friend, the member for Basildon and Billericay, welcomed the valuable insight that he gained from his recent visit to the team on the ground in Tyneside. But above all, we pay tribute to the victims, the families and the campaigners who have fought relentlessly and bravely on this issue. I previously raised in this House the concerns the victims and their families have had about the speed and structure of the compensation scheme. They've been repeatedly frustrated by a failure to speed up payments. While there are signs that the pace is finally starting to increase, I know that the frustrations remain and we share them. This scandal happened over decades, under successive governments of different parties, but we all have a responsibility to do what we can to right the wrongs of the past as quickly as possible, and the opposition will support the government when it is doing the right thing to do so. I also previously raised the issue of engagement and called on the government to further solidify ongoing consultation and communication with victims and their families. And it was disappointing to see, as laid out in Sir Brian's additional report, that sufficient progress has not yet been made on this issue. But I do welcome the government's response on this matter, but would urge the government to ensure that this engagement work is carried out rapidly and urgently. Because victims and their families deserve real action on this. And as the additional report makes clear, they've had far too many assurances, but not yet enough substantial engagement. I'm pleased that the government is now taking action on some of the issues around atypical personal or health impacts and on supplementary routes, which I raised when we discussed the Infected Blood Compensation Scheme regulations in March. I know that it will bring great comfort to many of those that that have been infected with the diseases that have been mentioned. I appreciate that the government is taking forward Sir Brian's recommendation on a grievances mechanism. And on all sides of this House, I'm certain that we're all hope that implementation of this recommendation and the others from the report will meet Sir Brian's inquiry's terms of reference and complete the compensation and resolution process. However, the government must ensure that this mechanism is an active one, not simply a recording device. While it is incredibly important that lessons are continuously learned from this tragedy, it is also really important that those cases, of which we know that there are a significant proportion, that contain difficulties in regard to compensation eligibility, are addressed as a matter of urgency. And that all such cases, many of which will probably come through this new mechanism, are considered carefully, and that all information on the claim status and decisions made on it are communicated clearly and frequently to the complainant. But above all, it is essential that learning those lessons must not come at the cost of delayed payments to those who simply cannot afford to wait any longer. And to that end, I would appreciate the Minister's clarity on the number of personnel that he expects to be tasked with the grievances mechanism and the oversight structure which will be put in place over it. Will that be the advisory board being established? And if so, what specific oversight powers will the advisory board have? We support the government in taking these measures forward, and we will do what we can as the official opposition to help these actions to be implemented. But it is incredibly important that the government is clear to this House what measures it is putting in place to ensure that the steps announced here today are carried through and enacted efficiently and effectively. Because, Madam Deputy Speaker, no amount of money can undo the harm that was tragically inflicted on so many. But a comprehensive and effective compensation scheme can offer a lifeline to victims and to their families who have suffered for far too much, for far too long.
Minister.
I thank the Shadow Minister for his contribution, in particular the tone of it, and I do think that the cross-party way in which this has been approached has been crucial. It's something I did in opposition. I also, as well, pay tribute to my predecessor as Paymaster General, the Honourable Member for Salisbury, for the work that he did driving this forward. I agree with the Honourable Gentleman that this additional report is a very significant piece of work, and I echo his thanks to IBCA's staff. On speed of payments, he referred to the number of payments. Of course, IBCA has used that test and learn approach. But I want to say to him, and indeed to the House, I've announced today a substantial number of changes to this scheme, but it has to be on the basis that that will not affect the current speed of rollout of payments. And that is why I still expect IBCA to contact all registered infected people to begin a claim before the end of the year, and indeed to open the service to affected people by the end of the year as well. I agree also with the Honourable Gentleman about the need for an active consultation mechanism, and I entirely agree with him as well about clarity of communication. And I very much hope that we can continue this cross-party spirit into the delivery phase that's so important.
Kim Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Victims, survivors and campaigners have been fighting for decades for truth and justice due to cover-ups of public servants. And last year, the Prime Minister called for a duty of candour law to prevent future cover-ups, like the infected blood and post office scandals. And I could not agree with him more. But if we are to restore trust in state, does the Minister agree that it's high time for Hillsborough Law to be implemented in full, as promised by the Prime Minister last September?
Madam Deputy Speaker, I entirely agree on the need for a Hillsborough Law, and I say to my honourable friend that this government moving forward is absolutely determined to get it right and to lead that culture of change we need across public service, so that people are not putting their own reputations or the reputation of institutions above public service, and we are determined to lead that change.
Liberal Democrat spokesperson Sarah Olney.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I thank the Minister for his statement, and we would also like to pay tribute to the ongoing work of Sir Brian Langstaff and his team as they continue to investigate this appalling scandal. Liberal Democrats know that victims of the infected blood scandal deserve compensation. They and their families have been mistreated and been waiting decades to see justice. We've welcomed the establishment of this scheme in August 2024 and the commitment shown by governments from both sides of the House to justice for these victims. However, Sir Brian Langstaff's additional report has been excoriating about both the glacial pace of payments and the abject failure to listen to victims. And one of the most scathing findings in the report stated that victims of the scandal had not been listened to. As reported by Sir Brian, the experts who were responsible for the design of the compensation scheme were forbidden to talk with victims and their families. After so many years of secrecy, deceit and delays, excluding victims and their families was wholly unacceptable. This report has been welcomed by many victims, including many of the 122 haemophiliac boys that attended the Lord Mayor Treloar College in Hampshire. And my honourable friend, the member for Eastleigh, has been a powerful advocate for these victims. And I thank her for her work advocating for constituents like Gary, who welcomed the findings of this report. But that's why we are urging the government to set out clearly and in detail the timelines for delivering compensation. And we're calling for the government to properly engage with victims and their families. And I ask the Minister if he agrees that it's entirely unacceptable that victims were not involved in the original design of the scheme and that they'd been consistently ignored. And can I ask when victims of the scandal can expect the implementation of Sir Brian Langstaff's recommendation to introduce a formal advisory body of victims for the Infected Blood Compensation Authority? Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker.
Minister.
Thank you. And first of all, Madam Deputy Speaker, in terms of transparency around the expert group that was established under my predecessor, I entirely acknowledge Sir Brian Langstaff's criticisms and points that he's made on that. But in creating, which the government's now going to have to, new sets of regulation, clearly I'm going to have to reconstitute an expert group, but I undertake the House I will put transparency at the heart of that group, including publication of its work and its minutes, because I think that is essential to regain trust. The Honourable Lady is absolutely right too about how essential it is to put the voice of victims at the heart of what we're doing. But I would also say to the House in relation to today, at the autumn budget last year, the Chancellor set aside £11.8 billion of funding to the end of the Parliament to pay compensation for victims. The policy decisions I am announcing today are currently estimated to cost around £1 billion in further compensation payments. The total cost depends on what is agreed following consultation with the community, but the Government has said, and it will stand by, paying what it takes to fund the scheme. And we will update the forecast costs at the autumn budget of 2025, but victims should be in no doubt of the Government's determination to seek justice.
Chris Webb.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I thank my right honourable friend for his statement this evening. Following the inquiry's report, will the Government now speed up the current timelines to 2027 and 2029 for the payment of compensation to those victims?
Minister.
Madam Deputy Speaker, the 2027 and 29 dates were backstops. My determination was for payments to be made as soon as possible. I hope what I've said to the House in terms of offers of payment, and indeed payments starting to affected people this year, is an indication of that speeding up.
Damien Hines.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. And can I welcome what the Paymaster General has said about removing administrative burdens to payment, accepting the recommendations and his commitment to working with the community and doing so in a timely way. And I know he will continue to devote his considerable energies to those things. Could he also say a word more about memorials? And I'm thinking particularly of the young victims from Treloar's. And I welcome what he said about the appointment of a chair to that committee. But is there a timeline for that? Obviously, there are sensitive matters to deal with, but with the passage of time, does he have a time frame in mind for its completion?
Minister.
The Honourable Gentleman, I know, raises the issue of Treloar's because it's in his constituency, and he speaks very powerfully. I've also spoken in recent weeks to, indeed, a former Treloar's student, and hearing about the experiences there never fails to move people when they hear about it. Now, I'm pleased. I've made the appointment of Clive Smith. That is already done. Now, I'm asking him now to progress that memorialisation work, firstly, quickly, because the Honourable Gentleman is absolutely right about the passage of time, but also in a way that brings the whole community together. I know Clive has set out his intention to appoint a vice chair to represent the whole blood transfusion community, and I welcome that effort to bring the community together in what's going to be very emotional memorialisation.
Ian Byrne.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I thank the Minister for his statements, but the infected blood scandal is the worst treatment disaster in NHS history. But as the inquiry's chair said, this disaster was not an accident. Institutional reputation was put above truth and ordinary people paid the price. It's far from alone. Horizon, nuclear test veterans, Grenfell, Hillsborough. The Hillsborough Law Minister would end this culture of cover-up, which is why victims and families, including those of the infected blood scandal, fully support it. The Prime Minister promised one of his first acts would be to introduce this legislation. More than a year on, still waiting. So does the Minister recognise the importance of fulfilling this pledge before Labour returns to Liverpool for party conference in September?
Madam Deputy Speaker, I absolutely understand the importance of introducing the duty of candour. As I indicated in my answer to my honourable friend a moment or two ago, and to which my honourable friend refers, Sir Brian Langstaff talked about what he called this pervasive culture, this concept of people putting their own or institutional reputations above the public interest. The government is determined to change that, and is determined as well to get the duty of candour right, working with the families, which I think is absolutely crucial.
David Mundell.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. As co-chair of the all-party group on HIV/AIDS, I obviously very much welcome the removal of the 1982 start date. Coincidentally, today is Zero HIV Stigma Day, and I think it is important that we recognise the stigma that so many people suffered as a result of contracting HIV through infected blood. And can I say to the Minister, the hope that one of the supplementary routes to compensation might be to those who did suffer extreme stigma, discrimination, or severe psychiatric consequences of the contraction of HIV.
General.
I thank the Honourable Gentleman for his comments about the removal of the 1982 date. It was something I promised in my evidence of the inquiry to look at, and I'm pleased to be able to remove that date today. With regard to stigma, he is absolutely right. I visited the Terence Higgins Trust only in recent weeks, and listening to the terrible stigma that people suffered is extraordinarily moving, and he is absolutely right to remind us about that. And I think as we move forward with trying to deliver justice, that is something we should all keep at the forefront of our minds.
Clive Efford.
Deputy Speaker, I welcome my right honourable friend's statement on behalf of the all-party parliamentary group. It is a major step forwards, as he knows the issue about engagement with the community that's affected and infected has been a major bone of contention since the expert group set the tariff. Now, for over 40 years, they've been ignored and lied to by the state that should have been there and been on their side. At the time of that he published his recent report, Sir Brian Langstaff said, for decades, people who suffered because of infected blood have not been listened to. Once again, decisions have been made behind closed doors, leading to obvious injustices. Now, my honourable friend has said he's going to accept most of the recommendations, but if he's going to consult, it's got to be the community that he consults with. So will he give that guarantee that it will set up a proper mechanism that will be approved by the community, and also to provide financial support to those organisations that are giving advice to the victims that are making claims?
On the points raised by my honourable friend, first of all, on consultation, he's absolutely right. I'm determined that we are going to get this right moving forward. Secondly, as I indicated in my statement with regard to the organisations and recommendation 10 of Sir Brian Langstaff's May 2024 report, the DHSC is looking not only at this year again, but also looking to the future as well, because my work in recent weeks speaking to charities has made clear that they want to look beyond this financial year, and I agree.
Ian Sollum.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I would also thank the Minister for his statement, and in particular his statement that IBCA will design and introduce a process for registration. Sir Brian Langstaff did conclude that the current approach to compensation perpetuates harm by creating different treatment for registered and unregistered victims. I wonder if the Minister could confirm whether that also includes interim payments for unregistered victims. That was another recommendation in Brian Langstaff's additional report. Thank you.
Minister.
Madam Deputy Speaker, firstly in relation to the registration, as the Honourable Gentleman will have seen, IBCA has accepted all the recommendations Sir Brian Langstaff has made, including that. I've also, with regard to the estates of those who sadly passed away, just obviously at the dispatch box, extended interim payments as well, and I hope to be able to announce very soon the timetable for that.
Ian Labour.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The very fact that Sir Brian Langstaff reopened the scheme for the additional report bears testimony that there's something sadly wrong with the initial scheme. And I'm wondering tonight whether the infected blood victims will be warmly welcoming the statement from my right honourable friend. I wonder whether they're a little bit apprehensive, whether they're frustrated, whether they're disappointed, because the government have said that they'll only accept, at this point, 7 out of 9 of the recommendations. Because, you know, there's been only 460 victims settled to date, whilst many others have sadly passed on. I wonder if my right honourable friend can clarify what will happen to those waiting to start their claim. These are the Tuesday night lottery club. These are the people who've been waiting for months for a phone call to tell them that they'll get an invitation to apply for compensation. Will the new invoice be put on hold while they revisit the settled claims? And is it still a priority of starting all living infected claims by the end of the year?
The answer is yes, absolutely, and I wouldn't have made such a substantial number of changes without assurance that it wouldn't delay the ongoing payment. So my honourable friend's question, the living registered infected, the IBCA have said that there will be offers to all those by the end of the year, and that is unchanged by the changes I've made to the scheme today. And secondly, the promise we've made to start the affected by the end of the year stands as well. In terms of all the, as I just said a moment or two ago, there will now be the IBCA will and has accepted the recommendation of registration. IBCA is also looking as well and has accepted the recommendation about cohort prioritisation that's been made with Sir Brian Langstaff. But I hope as well, my honourable friend, who is a very powerful advocate on these matters, will also see that when I went to the inquiry and said I would look constructively at this, that's precisely what I've done. And on those recommendations where we're consulting, it's precisely because I want the voice of the community to be heard.
Sir Julian Lewis.
It was in 2015 that I first raised the case of my constituent Leslie Hughes, who was infected with contaminated blood in 1970 and only discovered the reason for 4 decades of ill health in about 2010. So it's great that this progress has been made. Very large sums of money are going to be paid in compensation. So can the Minister outline what provision there will be for the recipients to receive financial advice to make sure that they're not taken advantage of by unscrupulous people, for example, people trying to tell them how to make a claim that they can make directly?
Minister.
Yes, I agree entirely with the Honourable Gentleman when he talks about that risk. Is something I've been very conscious of, and that is why the government has signed off both financial support for legal advice, but also financial support for financial advice as well. And I agree with the Honourable Gentleman for the reason he says it's absolutely crucial.
Alex Baker.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Minister has heard me talk about my constituent Brendan West, a veteran who lived unknowingly with hepatitis C for decades after being infected through a military blood transfusion. Brendan talks about how he feels lucky to be alive, but his view is that successive governments continue to delay justice for him by design. So I welcome that Brendan has just received an invite to start the process for compensation, but how long can Brendan expect that process to take? He has served our country, suffered a horrific injustice in the process, and now deserves to be able to not waste a single further day in living out the next chapter of his life.
Minister.
And I say to my honourable friend, I know she's raised her constituent before, IBCA is operationally independent, but I stand ready to give any support that is required to speed up claims, which I think is absolutely crucial. But in terms of money, there is absolutely no deliberate delay from the government in terms of the money being paid. There was £11.8 billion allocated to this in the autumn budget. I have just announced a series of measures of around £1 billion of worth. That is the commitment of this government to securing justice, and I will continue to do all I can to speed up payments.
Robin Swan.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. In regards to the announcement today made by the Paymaster General, as far as I can see, some of his announcements and the acceptance of some of the recommendations and sub-recommendations will actually cause those devolved administrative bodies to have to stay open for a longer period of time. They were initially scheduled to close, I believe, on the 1st of February 2026, but will now have to stay longer than that. Can I seek a reassurance from the Paymaster General that he will ensure that all those costs will be met by the Treasury and that there will be no divergence between the supports given to those infected or affected anywhere across the United Kingdom, as there was previously due to the work that started by the inquiry?
Minister.
The honourable gentleman raises a perfectly reasonable point, and I spoke yesterday to the, last week, on Thursday, to the health ministers of all three of the devolved administrations, including Minister Nesbitt in the Northern Ireland Executive. He is right that the schemes for Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland will stay for a further year. That has been done to make sure we can keep up the pace of payments at IBCA, but I can give him the reassurance, as I gave to the health ministers, that it will be funded by the UK government. We're not asking the devolved administrations to bear the cost of that.
Jessica Tarl.
The Minister knows I've raised the case of the affected in my constituent Ronan, whose mother Jane died from hepatitis C after a blood transfusion she was recommended following an ectopic pregnancy. Now, while I welcome the announcement of the affected estates, can I ask when the affected, and particularly parents and partners, will be invited to start their claims? Many have been waiting decades for justice and are concerned they won't see it in their lifetimes.
Minister.
Again, my old friend makes a very good point. I think in the first instance, as I've said, the affected payments will start by the end of the year, and that remains the case. There has been this concern about the affected estates, and I hope that my honourable friend will have seen I not only accepted the recommendation, I actually extended it by a further 2 years as well to try to give that reassurance.
Jim Shannon.
Madam Deputy Speaker, can I thank the Minister very much for his statement. No one can doubt the Minister's commitment, and we thank him very much for that, and government as well, by the way, because ultimately that's who he's doing on behalf of. It's always good to hear that movement has been made in compensation and to make it as fast as possible. Can I ask, would the Minister reconsider the rejection of the recommendation by Sir Robert Francis for an enhanced award for people with extra hepatic disorders resulting in long-term severe disability, including people currently included within the special category mechanism and its equivalents in Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland? And secondly, I could just ask this, in relation to the referred to substantial regulations in 2026, could I ask them to come forward in 2025?
Minister.
In terms of the first point, I mean, obviously, as I've just said, we have acknowledged Sir Brian Langstaff's criticisms around the special category mechanism. That's why I'm taking action on that, and I'm announcing that today. In relation to the very specific condition that he is talking about, and he's referring back, I think, to Sir Robert Francis' previous report, I'm certainly happy to write to him on that particular detail. In terms of bringing forward the first set of regulations that I have spoken about, yes, it will be before the end of the year.
Tracy Gilbert.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and can I thank the right honourable gentleman for his statement tonight. One of my constituents, now in her 80s, cared for her husband, who was a victim of unethical research in Edinburgh. Her son now fears that she will die before receiving recognition or redress for what she endured. Does my right honourable friend recognise that there's a real fear that carers of infected people will die waiting for their compensation? And if so, what steps will this government take to ensure that carers reaching the end of their lives can be prioritised for compensation?
My honourable friend is absolutely right, and that's why I've changed the scheme in respect of affected estates. Sir Brian Langstaff's recommendation was for those who sadly pass away between May of 2024 and 2029. I've actually extended that by 2 years to 2031 precisely for the reason that my honourable friend raises.
Speaker, can I thank the Minister for his statement, the right response to a very thorough report that yet again details the significant size of the scandal that we are trying to undo. Can I ask the Minister, he mentioned the level of increased payments that these measures will lead to. I think he mentioned the £1 billion figure. Can he tell us if there will be any additional resources given to deliver these recommendations in addition to extra payments?
Minister.
I just give my honourable friend the reassurance. The government has said that it will pay what it takes to fund the scheme, and we will then update the forecast costs at the autumn budget this year.
Final question, Chris Smith.
Thank you, Mayor. Can I thank the Paymaster General for his statement? And I think for all of us across the House, our hearts go out to the victims and their families of this terrible scandal. As somebody who saw a family member die of AIDS, I know how incredibly difficult that must have been for many of them. Would the Minister agree with me that the common thread in the affected blood scandal, the post office scandal, Hillsborough, and the one that comes across my desk the most, the pelvic mess scandal, is that victims were not listened to? The Paymaster General mentioned the need to consult on these recommendations. Can I ask how he's going to go about that consultation, and can he assure me that it will be thorough?
Minister.
Yeah, my honourable friend speaks very powerfully about his own personal experience, and he's entirely right about a consistent failure on behalf of the state over many decades, many scandals that have been debated in this House to listen to victims, and absolutely getting the consultation right, ensuring that we hear the voice of victims and the voice of the community is absolutely crucial to the government going forward.